Welcome to Technical Writing. We are going to explore what technical writing is and why we should engage ourselves in technical writing. And we shall focus on one example of such writing, and that is email writing. But let's first begin by surveying what exactly is involved in technical writing. What is it? I know you are already very well aware and possibly well acquainted with what technical writing is. But all the same, I would like us to go through this and share with you what exactly technical writing is about and why we need it and who needs it. Technical writing is currently is one of the career that is growing at a very fast rate. It is actually projected that in the developing world, in the Western world, it will be growing or is already growing for about 10% between 2014 and 2024. So ladies and gentlemen, you can see how important it is that you gain knowledge of this skill here. It could be a sad story in developing countries that technical writing may not be as much appreciated as it is in the Western world. But whatever it is, we can still use this kind of skill here to influence and possibly to stamp our presence and authority in the companies and organizations where we are working. Probably they would even be wanting to hire somebody, an expert, to do this. But if you can be able to do it, you shall be actually marketing yourself as well as the organization where you're working. Our technical writing, as you may be aware of, it is audience-centered. It is an audience-centered means of communication that provides the reader with a clear and easy to understand information. What we mean here is that the information that we present usually under technical writing is either one audience or multiple audience, but we are targeting that specific audience, and it is that particular audience that we are going to package the information for. If it is instruction on how to use a gadget, an electronic gadget, like for instance we usually have with the user manual, then we target, that is the audience, is the users of that kind of that gadget, electronic gadget. If it is an email that we are going to send to a lecturer or to a professor or to a human resource person in an organization where we want to apply for a job, then we are targeting that particular audience in that context. So ladies and gentlemen, technical writing, as I say, that it is audience-centered kind of writing that packages information in a manner that is simple, straightforward, so that the audience can be easily understand the message and access the message. You know, what is usually very important is how we access information. Information that is will pile up together becomes so difficult for anybody to access it easily. Remember that most of our audience or the clients for technical writing, they do not have time, because time is actually part of the business, part of the profit that we work for. And without profit, if time is going to be taken away when the person is supposed to be purchasing after a business somewhere or completing an assignment or a task somewhere, then it means that we are consuming the valuable time of such an audience. Therefore, when we package the information, it should be put in such a way that it is easy to access this information and should be clearly spelled out, clearly structured, so that somebody doesn't need to struggle to find this information. If, for instance, sometimes it may be difficult for an audience to read the whole document. for the kind of information that you have presented. But if you package it in such a way, possibly for instance with the subheading, as we shall see later on, the audience, the reader will go to those specific subheadings and read only those areas. Possibly if there's need to read the whole of it later on, then the audience or the reader will come later on when there's time available. Sometimes we want a quick scan through to get the key information, so in order to take action. So that is why it is important that when we engage ourselves in technical writing, we package out this information in a manner that is systematic, it is clear and easy to access by our readers. In the business world, as I've already mentioned, the time is very important. The time is part of the profit, and therefore that is what every reader of technical writing considers. So the kind of information that you are going to package here will be very significant when you are going to communicate to a particular audience, because you need to consider the kind of time that is available to this audience. Of course, you're not going to ask the audience and say, how much time do you have? But we can predict that, say, these are busy people who do not have a lot of time in their hands. So what information that we need to package should be carefully selected, carefully arranged, and carefully structured. Then it is also important that the writer should recognize and addresses the importance of time in effective and efficient communication by providing documents written in specific format using language that is not ambiguous, language that you struggle really to understand, to interpret, and say, I think this is what it is. As I said before, that this technical writing is audience centered, or it is audience tailored. It means therefore that we need to communicate as specifically as possible. We need to be direct. We need to say exactly what we want to say, rather than saying this when we mean something else, and we expect our audience to interpret what exactly we are communicating. So, ladies and gentlemen, ensure that the language is clear and conveys the kind of information that you want to relay. Let's look at formatting and the language that is involved in technical writing. And ladies and gentlemen, as I've already mentioned, that the way we structure, the way we format, the way we arrange, the way we package information when we are dealing with technical writing is very significant, because it helps us to see what kind of information should be put where, and so that our audience can be able to look for the information in such areas, rather than reading the whole document if somebody doesn't have the time. Sometimes the document, as we shall see later on, may actually be read by multiple people. Although the target reader is one, we have one primary reader, but we can also have several secondary readers. And primary readers will of course read the whole document, but the secondary readers will only select areas that they think are important to them. So therefore, formatting becomes very important. We have already briefly talked about the language that we use in technical writing. So documents written in technical communication are formatted using technical knowledge and practices common to the field of that writing. We say that when you're formatting any document under technical writing, you need to follow a technical layout, a technical arrangement or structure of the work. And by technical here, we are referring to there's certain specific knowledge and certain specific practices that are common in the field of technical writing. So when you are writing, that is actually the reason why we are laboring to go through this lecture, that we acquaint you with what is common practice when you are dealing with technical writing. And then of course we are going to look at some of the examples of technical writing, even though we shall not look at all of them in detail, but we shall mention them. In some lectures, you're going to cover them as well. Most of these documents are formatted using headings to allow the reader easy access to information. I've already told you about the formatting, that it is very important that when we format any document under technical writing, we want to have the information as easily accessible as possible by the audience. So it is important that some of the documents will be using headings and subheadings so that it is easier for the reader to locate the information. If the person wants information for this particular or in this particular area, can know where to go it and will be directed by the subheading. The language should be appropriate and should be clear and simple. We talked about the easy access of information. So if the language is so complicated and possibly technical, it becomes very difficult for the reader to access the information. And remember that we mentioned previously that every writing that we are engaged in, we want a feedback, we want a response. So technical writing of any kind will definitely call for a response. If there's no response, then it means you have not communicated, or there's something that went wrong in the process of communication. So ladies and gentlemen, ensure that the language is appropriate, ensure that the language is clear, ensure that the language is simple. Avoid technical terms as much as possible, because not every reader is conversant with such fields, unless the audience that you are targeting are people in that profession, in that career. Then you can retain technical terms in your technical writing. Use hierarchical structure. When we talk about using hierarchical structure, it means that you're going to arrange your information beginning from a certain point that will flow until it reaches the end, so that the reader begins from a certain point and follows it up to the very end. For instance, if you're writing a report of, say, let's say, a report of any length, of course you're going to start with the introduction, then you go to the body, then you go to the conclusion, and then the recommendations. So that's what we're calling hierarchical. So there's a certain order that you need to follow, beginning from a certain point and then growing until it comes to the end of it. So make sure that when you are going to arrange the information, follow a certain kind of order that can allow the reader to follow it as well as possible up to the end of it. So as I said here, that in some cases you may need a summary at the beginning before you actually present the content of the report. So you may have a summary. So somebody reads a summary to understand that, oh, this is what it's about. This was the problem that the person here was concerned with in solving, and this is the method that the person used in order to solve, and this is how it was solved. So somebody can want a quick recap of the information, and that is enough for that person to understand what it is, and possibly if wants further reading of the information, then can settle down to read. Then you can follow it with the introduction, the body, I talked about the conclusion, and then the recommendation. Finally, ensure that you use correct grammar and punctuation. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no way you are going to run away from grammar and punctuation. That, okay, the academic writing that you dealt with in writing and studies skills 1, where there was a lot of emphasis that was put on grammar and punctuation. You know quite well that poor use of grammar or sentences that are written using ungrammatical structures will put your audience off. Either will get irritated and not continue to read, or simply gets discouraged and does not continue at all and simply throws the document away. So every piece of writing that you engage yourself in, especially formal writing, ensure that the grammar is as clean as possible, and the punctuation marks that should be where they should have been included. Let's look at some of the documents that are classed under technical writing, or a technical writer can be engaged in. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a skill. Much as you are doing an elementary part of this study, people are earning money out of technical writing. We have technical writers. So on top of your profession, on top of your career, why don't you develop this skill here? Why don't you develop this knowledge here by further reading it and studying it, so that you can be a technical writer? Companies, organizations are looking for people who can describe their products to clients, write instructions on how to use their products. And here you are being exposed, you're being exposed to this kind of skill here. So it can be very important for you if you can be able to do this. So some of the documents that fall under technical writing, not limited to this. We have reports, various types of reports. We have email, we have memos, we have brochures, we have online help system. When you click, when you're trying to install a product, sometimes they will give you a helpline how to install the system. So there are people who write that. We have video tutorials. We have user manuals. For instance, direction, I've already mentioned products, directions on products, or how to use a certain tool, instructions on to use that software program. For instance, we have press releases by organizations and companies. We have instructions on, like these days, we have a lump of instructions on how to avoid the COVID infections. We have executive summaries, which you find with reports, as I've already mentioned, that some reports may require use of a summary first before you present the entire report. So you have the executive summary. So you need, if you know how to write this, it can be very important. Then we have product descriptions. So I've already mentioned this, that some companies want there to have their products described on the package or on the packaging. For instance, recently I was looking at the tea leaves, Uganda tea leaves, garden tea leaves, and I found actually that the information, the description, the technical writer, I think, missed quite a lot of things. Probably you can take time and study the garden tea and then see the instruction, product description that has been written there, and see, can you be able to be a better writer than the one who inscribed the things there? Then we can have proposals. Then we have websites. So these are some of them, but not all, the documents that can fall under technical writing. Let's look at the difference between technical writing and other forms of writing, such as academic writing. Technical documentation is often heavily focused on step and process. So usually most of this technical writing, you find that it follows a certain kind of step. We already talked about the hierarchical arrangement of the presentation of the document. Sometimes it follows a certain process. From this you move to the other one, depending on the kind of process that you are following. Then we have technical documentations is usually very direct. I already mentioned this, and getting right to the point and tells the reader exactly what that reader needs to know. I mentioned before that our audience or readers of technical writing or technical documents, they do not have much time. So make sure that when you communicate, say exactly what you want to say, so that even when the way you have arranged the document, the audience, the reader knows where to find what kind of information, and tell that audience what that audience need to know, and leave out other pieces of information. So in some cases, technical documents may contain a lot of details. For instance, in report and proposals, covering so many pages, sometimes even covering close to 60 or even 100 pages, depending on the kind of proposal that you are engaged in. So this is because the information that is required for the reader to understand the information better, the product better, or learn how to use whatever you are dealing with correctly requires details. And then technical writing is also definite in its purpose. Most cases either information or persuasion and so forth. So therefore you need to, and also follows a very strict format. We have already talked about the format. That the format, the certain kind of generic format that all technical writing you follow. And then it also uses language that is very appropriate in many cases in the context of what you're writing about in terms of the vocabulary and the tone. We shall briefly look at the tone in technical writing. Let's again now look at preparing to write a technical document. What do you need to do? What do you need to have before you engage yourself in technical writing in a document that you're going to write? So the first thing is what is very important first is to consider who your audience is. We said before that the audience will help us, guide us in determining the kind of vocabulary to use, the kind of tone to use, the kind of format to use, what kind of details, as we shall see here, that you need to include. So who is the intended main audience? I told you before that there's the primary audience and there's the secondary audience. So consider the primary audience. Who is your primary audience? Is it one person or are there many? Then consider the subject knowledge, vocabulary, and biases that your audience already have. What information that your audience already have. So if they already have this, do you need to include it? If now what kind of vocabulary do I need to use? I already mentioned this. If the audience is not technical in the field that you're writing about, then it means therefore the vocabulary that you're going to use should be friendly to the audience. If these people are already biased about something, then it means therefore you need to see how are you going to package the information so that it addresses their biases and can be able to transform their thoughts, their attitude towards whatever you're writing. Then how will the report be used? How do you expect the report to be used? Is it, do you expect a response? Do you expect an action to be taken? And so forth. So consider also what you think the report is going to be used for. Is it consumption? So that the audience is going to use it in order to understand the information and be able to get the product and so forth. Then again, see what information must be conveyed and how much detail do you expect. Remember, we mentioned about the issue of time. Audience, many readers of technical writing do not have much time unless it is essential that you include as much details as possible, as we said with reports. Some reports, not all reports. So consider how much detail do you need to. We already said that you need to know how much does your audience already know. So if they already know this, then what information don't they know that you need to include? So these are some of the considerations that you need to bear in mind. And then determine the purpose of the intended message. What is the objective of the message? Do you want a feedback? Maybe through another email or in a written form? Or do you want an action where somebody is going to apply for something? And so forth. So consider the purpose of the intended message. This will help you to focus on what to include and what to leave out. The purpose of may be to provide information to the audience about a service or how it can solve their problem. You remember, if you are going, for instance, you're being asked to write a product description. So you're going to study. Of course, you don't need to be a technician in of that product in order to write an instruction or a product description. What you do is you listen to the technician. A technician has the information but does not have the skill of how to write. You have the skill. So that is how people work as a team. So consider the kind of information that you are going to include in the product description, which is going to solve a problem. Nobody is going to buy a product if it is not going to help him or her. It must solve a problem for that particular audience. So describe it and show how it produces, so it solves a problem. Or it could be to persuade, the purpose could be to persuade or influence, persuade and influence decision making. It could be you're analyzing a data to solve a problem, or you're going to describe a product and how it benefits the audience. It can be a report on a specific problem that you are addressing. For instance, you're going to write a report maybe on consumer attitude towards a new product. So you will write you are going to report on the specific. If there's a problem, then there must be a problem. Otherwise, if there's no problem, then you don't need to carry out a survey or a research. And then collect adequate and relevant information with a sufficient depth for the intended audience before starting to write. So ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the pieces of information that you need to bear in your mind before you get yourself engaged in any technical writing. Ensure that you know the audience, ensure that you know the purpose why you're writing it, ensure that you collect all the necessary information to enable you to write what is effective and efficient. Now we're going to look at, you now know already what technical writing is all about. In the previous slides, we have gone through, we have seen that it is audience tailored, or it is audience centered, and that it has certain kind of structure or format that it follows, following the hierarchical arrangement that flows from one point to the other. We also saw what you need to bear in mind before you actually engage yourself in any technical writing. Now, I want us to look at an email writing as an example of technical writing. It is an example of electronic writing. So electronic writing falls under technical writing because of the fact that they follow similar generic structure. You must target the audience. You need to structure it in a certain way that can enable the reader to follow the information. So there's an image here for you to consume. I picked it from online. You can study it and see what exactly it is that we call professional email format. Study the illustration and then see the parts which are there. Some parts have already been labeled for you. We have the subject line, we have the salutation, we have the body, we have the closing or the conclusion, and then the signature. We are going to look at each of these one here in detail. But it is very important that you first brainstorm, whether you're alone or with a colleague, and look at this illustration and try to see how, and maybe compare to the kind of emails that you have been writing before. We are also going to look at what exactly do we mean by a professional email message. Yes, we are going now to look at a professional email message. What is it? We send many types of emails, but we are not going to look at all forms of emails. we are looking at emails that we normally send in our workplaces. Sometimes you may find that you are engaged in a section that possibly deals with email, but even if it's not a section that deals with sending emails, everybody at one point you will have to write an email. Even right now at university, you need to write. You will at a certain point find yourself writing and sending a professional email to your lecturer, to your tutor, to your professor, and so forth. So what exactly do we mean by a professional email message? Now, according to the Longman Dictionary, an email is a message that is sent or received electronically using the email system. This is the software that is already designed for us so that we can be able to use it and send message from one person to another, and then receive message also from the sender. So briefly, that is what an email is. So any information that you use the email system already designed for you to send, because when you open your computer and then go to your email address, when you want to send a message, the format is already there for you. You have the part of to whom you are sending the email for place for the email of the person who is going to receive your email. Then you have a part for the subject. Then now the space for you to text the message that you want to send, to write the message that you want to send. So that is what we're referring to as the email system. Now, a professional email message is any formal email message that you send to someone that you do not know, or you do not know well, or to somebody who is in authority, such as your lecturer, a public servant, or a public officer, or even a company that you want to do business with. Now, doing business here does not mean that you're going to sell or to buy a product, but doing business here is that you want to have a dealing with them, you want to have an interface with them, you want to have a communication or a conversation with them, you want to have a discussion with them. That is what we mean that you have a business with them. So any kind of information that you're going to use the email system in order to send that message is what we are referring to as a professional email. It is formal, and therefore everything that you do about it should be done formally, beginning from the salutation, as we shall see, the body, the conclusion, and then the signing out. You can use formal emails. Now, this bullet here tells us when do you use a formal email message. So you can use a formal email message when you're sending messages within the organization to your colleagues, to your boss or bosses. Of course, there's some times when some organizations may not be very formal in the way they share information. So if you're not very sure about this, please find out by asking your colleagues how messages are sent. Sometimes even you can ask even your boss how you can send an email to him or her. In some cases, some organizations, people are very casual in the way they communicate. So if the organization has set a very casual kind of relationship among the staff, then you can move away from a professional email, from a formal email message to an informal email message. But by and large, it is always important that you stick to a professional email messaging. Otherwise, it can sometimes be misinterpreted, even when you are with a colleague you work with in the same department or in the same organization. But usually when now you're going to send it to somebody outside the organization, you need to be extremely formal in your presentation. Now, why send a professional email message? You can write a professional email message for various reasons. It can be for a recap of an important meeting that you held and you want to share possibly with the members who attended that meeting as you wait for the full minute of the meeting. So sometimes you can have just a quick summary and highlighting the key points of actions possibly that the members need to draw attention to, or if it is another scheduled meeting that is going to be as a result of the first meeting, then you can send the email to remind members about what it is. You can also use it to exchange messages or information. Many times we receive, sometimes you can bump on some very significant information online and you want to share it. Possibly it is very important, that can be very helpful to a colleague, either in the same organization or in another organization, but in the same field. But even at school, at university, you will find that you may bump on a certain kind of information, either necessary for either coursework or just on a topic that you're preparing for your presentation. So you can also send it, copy it, and then send, or either you send the whole document by attaching it to the email message, or you can send the link so that the person can be able to log in and access that information. Then we can also use send email when we are relaying very important updates. Usually in organizations we have updates. Some new developments keep coming up. So if there are updates either of a product or maybe a training of the staff, or an in-service kind of program, or a workshop and so forth, any new development, either security measures that have been put in place, you can send an email. Sometimes people think that a memo can be enough to do that, but remember, memos are usually placed on notices or on the walls or notice boards. But how many people sometimes can reach the notice board to read the information? So an email could be a quick way of doing that. You can also use an email when you're sending a letter of introduction, possibly introducing somebody on behalf of the organization. The letter of introduction can be sent as early as possible. You can also send an email when you're applying for a scholarship. And I want to tell you that all of you, after your graduation, must look for scholarships. And looking for a scholarship, then you need to know how to send scholarship applications using email. You may also be sending or applying for a job. Some of these forms can be forms for scholarships and for jobs or internships can be found. The template can be found online. So you just only need to download, and then you fill in, and then you send back. But even if you're going to send a form, a scholarship form, a job application form, an internship form, you're not just only going to send it bare like that. You need to accompany it with an email message, and then get this document attached to it, and then you send. Even if there's a link where they're asking you to send it directly, you can still accompany it without attaching, because sometimes some of them may not have the provision where you can attach to an email message. But ensure that after sending the document, the form, send also a separate email message to the person whose name must have been indicated on the form, or the office that was indicated on the form. Unless there is nothing complete, then you cannot struggle to find a person to whom an email message should be sent. You can also send an email message when you are requesting information or a feedback on something. We are going to find out that sometimes after you have sent an email to somebody, and it takes possibly 1 week or 2 weeks. Usually they say be patient when you have sent an email. Don't rush to find out immediately what has happened to the information that you sent to that particular recipient. Sometimes some people are very busy. They do not have time to read their emails. So give them time. So a 1 week or 2 weeks, unless otherwise. And then you can send another email inquiring, making an inquiry or requesting for information regarding the previous email that you sent. Or it can be inquiring information on something very different, not in regard to a previous email that was sent. Possibly you want information about maybe you want to buy land from somewhere and you want to send an email to somebody who is in that area so that can be able to furnish you with information. Or you want to buy a particular product and you send an email to that company or to that organization to send you information regarding the product that you want to buy. Then you can also send an email when you want to communicate with your lecturers, your tutors, your supervisors, and so forth. Please learn to communicate using email message, unless it is so urgent, and then you can make a phone call. Otherwise, the email is more formal and can be taken more seriously than a phone call. Then you can also send an email message as a follow-up of an interview that you attended. Many times, ladies and gentlemen, people after attending an interview, they just walk away like that, sitting and waiting for a miracle to happen or fate to fall on them. Do not sit and wait after attending an interview, either a job interview especially. Make sure that you send an email to a company, as a follow-up of the interview. For instance, you want to say you're making an inquiry as a result of the interview that you attended, or some other kind of information that may be necessary. Please don't sit. And finally, you can send also an email if you want to say thank you to an interview that you attended. And I think this is possibly more important, as equally important as sending an interview follow-up. Ladies and gentlemen, after attending whatever kind of interview is, send an email to thank the panel or thank the chairperson. It would be very important. It is one of the courteous way that we can build relationship with people, that we can remind people about us. You know, if you attended an interview where there was many people, even if there were as few as 5, sometimes they can't remember you. An email can be a very important tool for you to use in order to remind the members, the panel of the interview, that I am here. This is what I am. Thank them for giving you the opportunity, and tell them that you are looking forward to working with them. You can see you will wait and see what that simple message can do. This can be just one paragraph. You don't even need to write a lot about it. Okay, let's turn and look at when do we need to use an email and when shouldn't we use an email? Because an email, the way we have talked about it, looks like it is a solution to all forms of communication, but it is not. There are some situations that an email becomes very difficult. For instance, use an email when you know that the recipient is very difficult to be reached on phone, or the information that you are sending cannot be contained in a phone call, cannot be relayed rather using a phone call. Sometimes phone calls are not as seriously regarded as other means of communication, as I already said before. But if it is a simple piece of information that you want to know or you want to access, then you can use a phone call. But otherwise, look at the seriousness, the formality of the information, and then you can use an email. You can also use an email if the information is sent is not time sensitive. If something is needed tomorrow or today in the evening, then it means therefore an email will not work. Because a response, you know very well that not everybody can access their emails every time like a phone call, like a phone message. Even sometimes even a phone message may even take long to be read. So if it is not time sensitive, please use an email. But if it is so urgent and requires a quick response, then you are, for instance, you are filling a form and you want some information, some details of that you need to include on that form, then you cannot send an email. And for instance, if the form is needed on that very day that you're filling in, then you can also use an email if there are documents that you're going to attach to the email message and be sent electronically. You also need to send information if there's need to send information to multiple recipients at once, or yes, no, may not be necessarily, okay, can be at once, or can be sending to just multiple recipients. Sometimes it is actually not only, sometimes it is less costly to send emails using other means of information to multiple recipients. Then if you need a written record of the information that you're sending, remember that emails store information that we send. So if you want the record of it to remain for future references, you can send an email. Remember that a phone call, even though you may record it, but for how long will it last? But an email can last for a very long time. Now let's turn and look at the tips that you need to have when you are going to write a professional email. A well-composed email provides the recipient with a friendly, clear, concise, and actionable message. To meet this requirement, you need to practice. There's nothing, ladies and gentlemen, that can come so easily. Even after this lecture, you may not be able to write an effective professional email. You need to keep practicing. Unfortunately, in regards to people in my country here, Uganda, including you, my students, you want quick things. You want to do something now and get the result, get the feedback. Sometimes even using the same method over and over and over and getting the same result, because you're not taking time to reflect on, you're not practicing, you're not rehearsing. You need to rehearse certain things as many times as possible. So you need to be patient when you are going to write any professional email message. We are saying that let it be as friendly as possible. Don't harass people using email messages. Let it be clear. We already talked about this under technical writing, that all technical writing must be clear. The reader should be able to easily access the information. Be concise. Avoid wordiness. Words that do not add anything in the communication, remove them. And above all, ladies and gentlemen, there should be an action involved. Never write a letter of any kind, because an email is another form of letter writing, except that this is electronically done. Never write any document which does not include an action point. If you're going to send an email, what do you want that email to do? What do you want the recipient to do? There should be a point of action somewhere. That is one very important tip. 2, identify the purpose and then the audience. What is the purpose? Now this purpose will guide you on the action point, and then what kind of audience. We've already talked about this. Then use appropriate tone and register. Tone, we are going to look at tone, what it is. Now register usually regards the vocabulary. What kind of vocabulary are you going to use? Is it vocabulary that is formal? Is it vocabulary that is informal? So look at the kind of vocabulary that you employ in your email message. Keep the email concise. If it is one paragraph, let it be one paragraph. If it is 2 paragraphs, write 2 paragraphs, at most 3 paragraphs. But even if that's going to be 3 paragraphs, make sure that the sentences, don't write too many sentences in each paragraph. Each paragraph can contain about 2 sentences, at most 3 sentences, or even 1 sentence. If it goes beyond that, then simply use an attachment. If you're going to write a one-page letter of any kind, please make sure you use a document and then attach that document to your email message. Don't struggle to write a very long thing and squeezing it there. It will not work very well. Just have a separate document and attach to the email message. Make sure that you proofread, edit and proofread the work to avoid unnecessary errors that can put off your audience. Use appropriate etiquette. Etiquette is the rule of what is right and what is wrong. And every organization, every company, every society have certain kind of etiquette that they follow. And here we're saying be courteous, be polite. We already said before that be friendly. So be polite. Use polite greeting. Use polite tone. Use a friendly tone. And use a polite closing. Don't use the kind of language at the closing, language that is inappropriate in regards to the audience that you are writing to. And also remember to make a follow-up. We said that when you're going to make an email message follow-up, don't do it immediately. After 2 days, you're already making a follow-up. After 1 week, at least 1 week can be fair. But give the audience, give your reader, the recipient some time before you make a follow-up. Then double check to ensure that you have included, if there are attachments that have been referred to in the email message. Ensure that you check that you have included all of them. If there are 2 attachments, if there's 1 attachment, 2 attachments, 3 attachments, please make sure that they are all there as attachments. Let's look at now the actual writing, beginning with the formatting of your email message. So as we said before, that after now you have written the email address of the recipient, the next step is to look at the subject line. Why are you writing? What is the email message about? That is falls under what we call the subject line, which is similar to what you did when you're studying letter writing, the reference. So it is one very important aspect, one important part of the email message. Just like you saw with letter writing, that when you are going to write an official letter, there must be a subject, there must be a reference. It is that reference that guides or tells the reader what exactly the letter is about. That's the same thing that happens with the email. So the subject line contains the information that will help the reader to know what that email is about. So see here that all professional emails should have a subject line so that your recipient can know exactly what your email is about. A subject line is that short statement that summarizes the purpose of the email. Job application, interview thank you, interview follow-up. So, it is like a signpost to a place. And you know how important a signpost is. So the subject line is like a signpost, giving direction to what to find and where to find it. Then do not use one-word subject line. Interview, application. So if you use only one word subject line, it is not going to summarize what the email is about. So that's why it is important that you at least have 2 or 3 words, but again, don't let it be too lengthy. A couple of words, pick the keywords that contain the message that is in the email. If the message is time sensitive, ladies and gentlemen, remember before we say that messages that are time sensitive, we try to avoid using the email, but there are times when it is the only way to communicate. So if it is time sensitive, it has a deadline that is very urgent, then reflect the time, the date of the deadline as part of the subject line. For instance, I put here, meeting on Friday, 13th December 2020. So when somebody sees the 13th, then that person is going to say, oh, I think I need to read this. Sometimes we open emails, people open emails and say, oh, I will read this one later. Because the time sensitivity has not been included, and possibly the message is not time sensitive. But if it is time sensitive, please indicate sometime the time, the day, and the date, so that the person is aware that I need to prepare this, I need to be clear about this. Let's look at now the salutation. Salutation is just like you saw in letter writing. Salutation is the greeting. So when we're when we're writing a formal email message, we need also to be conscious about the greeting that we include in the letter. Don't rush and then go straight to the body of the message without a formal greeting. Let's start with a formal greeting and decide on what is appropriate. Sometimes it is dictated by the relationship that we have with the recipient. But usually the most common salutations or the greeting that is generic, that applies across all formal email messages, is dear, and put the title of the person, if there's, or the title of the person and the name. You can have full name, you can have one name. For instance, I have here, dear Dr. Andrew Omona, or dear Miss Perinat. So if you put it this way, it is formal. Avoid this one of saying hi, hey, hello. Sometimes it is acceptable, but be cautious about it depending on who is your recipient. And then if you're going to send to multiple recipients, remember we said that sometimes you can send to more than one recipient. If you're going to send more than one recipient, then the following are recommended. Can say to whom it may concern as your subject line, or no, not the subject line, sorry. For instance, where the salutation is, then you can possibly use dear members, then mention members of what. For instance, I said here, dear members of the wedding committee, dear members of the procurement committee, dear members of the contracts committee, and so forth and so forth. So that when you send, you're going to send to multiple people, you're clicking, and then the message will go to more than one person. You don't need to say dear so and so, and then it is cumbersome to do that, because it means now you need to change the salutation of each of the letters. Suppose you are going to send this email message to 10 or 50, God forbid, to 100 people. Are you going to keep on changing the salutation, the greeting, so that you are addressed to that person in particular? So to save time, you can use a collective salutation. Or you can say, hello everyone. Because if it is members of one organization or possibly in the same department, hello everyone can work. But it is a little less formal. So to me, what would be good for me is dear members. Even when you just want to stop at dear members, if the members don't have one group name, and it can be people of various groups, but you want the message to go to them, you can just simply say dear members and stop there. Let's look at the body. What do you put in the body? They always say that the first sentence, the opening sentence, should contain the purpose. Why are you writing it? I'm writing this to inform you about this, about a meeting that will take place. So state the purpose in the first sentence, just like you saw with letter writing, that your purpose of writing that letter must be indicated, contained in the first sentence. Then now provide the context, provide the background, the detail of the information to this statement. And as I said before, that you may have, say, 2 or 3 paragraphs. So if the first paragraph is stating the purpose, then the second paragraph can now contain the background information, provide some basic details. Then you have the closing, the conclusion. In the conclusion, you can repeat some of the things that, some key information, of course, should be connected with the purpose of the email message. And then in the same closing or conclusion, write an action. An action, state the desired outcomes of the email. What exactly do you want this person to do who has now read your email? Don't leave the email incomplete or hanging without a purpose. You said, yes, the purpose is that, but I would like you to do this for me. Or this is what this email is expecting you to do. Then the signature, is the place where you put your identity. Who am I? As well as possibly your position, if you have a position. So sometimes some organizations have automatic fixed signature. If it is there, then you do that. If not, then you can write your name. Again, as we said before, be friendly when you are writing your signature. Say sincerely, and then put that. Oh, thank you. Best wishes, regards, respectfully yours. So write what is friendly and what respects the recipient. Then sometimes, as we said before, that you may want to send an email to multiple people. So sometimes you can use the carbon copy. It's already formatted there. It is already in the system. Or you can use the blind carbon copy. You can read and then see how you can go about this and what is the difference between the carbon copy and the blind carbon copy. Why should you choose to use the carbon copy, or why should you choose to use the blind carbon copy? Then the tone that I talked about before. We said before that I briefly mentioned this, that a tone, when we talk about tone, in every writing has tone. Tone can be chatty, either conversational, which is informal. Tone can be formal. Hello, Dick, instead of Dixon or Dickens. Hello, Dick. The tone is informal. Possibly Dick, either Dickens or Dixon, whatever the abbreviation is, means that he is actually a very close friend to me, and possibly the subject I'm going to talk about does not require distancing myself from the relationship already I have with him. So that is tone. So tone can be formal, tone can be informal, can be chatty or conversational. So when you are going to, we can also say that tone can be respectful or disrespectful. So consider the kind of tone that you are going to. We said here that we have some of the phrases here that can be either be regarded as appropriate or inappropriate in terms of the tone, especially when we're talking about formal email message. Please help me. We're saying that is not appropriate at all. Please help me, even though we have the word please. But there's something that seems to be forceful in the request. Sometimes we just put the word please there for the sake of it. But when you consider it in the context of the other surrounding words, the meaning is completely very different. We're saying that instead of saying, please help me, we'd rather be more polite if you said, would you mind helping me? Instead of saying, I want to cancel my appointment, a mistake that I made one time when I sent an email, which I wouldn't want you to do because it ruined my relationship with the recipient. You would rather say, could I please cancel my appointment? Present it as a question that leave room to the other person to give a judgment, to give opinion. I need to reschedule. We rather say is it possible to reschedule? I did not understand. Could you explain it more to me? You rather say, I'm not sure I understood whatever it is. Could we meet to discuss it further? Instead of saying, could you explain to me? A discussion would be better because it means you also have an input that you're going to make in addition to the other one. Now let's look at two examples here of a formal email message. Actually, one example, one is regarded as inappropriate, and then the other has been improved and is much better now. I want you on your own to try to consider it, read it, and then see. As I put a question here, that what makes this version here inappropriate, and then what makes this version appropriate. We're not going to discuss it, but I would like you to read it and then possibly share with a friend and then see what is wrong with, even what we're saying is improved, can still be improved better and made possibly more effective and efficient. Thank you very much.